Some tales don't start with a decision. They start with a setback, a career, a residence, a touch of security. In Colorado, an increasing number of individuals are discovering they have no spot to head back to when the day ends. They pitch tents by waterways, slumber behind public buildings, or doze on seats in transit hubs. Some are solitary, others with kids, and each is striving to endure.
I've had 2 or 3 men one night that were circling my tent, and I know that they were men because I could hear them talking and stuff like that. And they were circling my tent, trying to figure out how to get me out, and they were, pulling on my tent and everything else. I've slept with knives. I've put a lock on the inside of my tent, locked myself in, because I figured they have to come through that tent to get me.
Throughout the state, homelessness isn't confined to urban cores anymore. It's appearing in rural villages, outlying neighborhoods, and even close to hiking paths in the mountain. You don't have to search diligently to spot it. The reality is, it's present, subdued, persistent, and expanding. In this footage, we examine homelessness in Colorado more deeply. We'll discuss the individuals enduring it, the obstacles they confront, and the frameworks attempting to adapt. Not solely via statistics, but through narratives, locations, and ordinary experiences. Because each tent or blanket conceals a human being, and every human has a cause for their situation. In Colorado, like in numerous regions nationwide, homelessness isn't merely a state of being, it's a topic of debate. And it's one that frequently splits opinions in uneasy manners. For certain people, meeting someone without a home on a Denver avenue prompts a moment of reflection, a stir to one's moral sense. For others, it sparks irritation, an indication that systems are breaking down or even being permitted to worsen unchecked. Today, views on homelessness in Colorado cover a broad and sometimes conflicting range. One perspective sees those without homes as casualties of adverse situations, folks pushed out by soaring housing costs, let down by a weakened mental health network, or simply handed misfortune by fate. These opinions emphasize kindness, accountability, and the necessity for shared support. They frequently point out systemic issues, shortages in low-cost housing, insufficient pay, ethnic inequalities, and under-resourced medical services that fuel the rising count of street dwellers. However, an opposing viewpoint exists. Parts of Colorado's population have become fatigued.
It's backing us into a corner and saying, what do we do?
Some perceive the camps, evident substance abuse, and expanding settlements as dangers to community security, commerce, and hygiene. The phrase quality of life surfaces often in these talks not regarding those outdoors, but for the passers-by, store proprietors with obstructed entrances, and households who feel uneasy in nearby green spaces. In municipal assemblies and digital discussions, you'll encounter intense arguments where homelessness shifts from a societal concern to a bother, or even a hazard. So, where is the boundary between understanding and demands? How do we reconcile respect for humanity with city harmony? These are dilemmas Colorado has grappled with for a long time. And honestly, I find myself navigating between these viewpoints. I think individuals deserve security in their areas. But I also think a community's true nature shows in its treatment of the weakest members. We can't penalize hardship and claim its benevolence. Regardless of whether Coloradans react with pity or resentment, one fact stands out. Homelessness has grown too prominent, too noticeable, and too ingrained in the state's environment to overlook. And as more people recognize that a lost position, dwelling, or aid network might push anyone to the edge, the notion of homelessness in America begins to seem less like data and more like a potential risk for anyone.
Like when we help each other out, it's like why like get mad at us for like sleeping at a spot, or if we're not hurting anybody or anything, not using no substance or nothing like that.
To grasp the magnitude of homelessness in Colorado, it's essential to go past vague perceptions and examine the figures directly along with the existences they represent. As of January 2023, per the yearly point-in-time survey by the Metro Denver Homeless Initiative, more than 9,065 individuals were facing homelessness statewide. This count encompasses both those in shelters and those without, and the real total could be much larger because of undercounting, particularly for car residents or temporary sofa stays. Among the hardest hit zones, Denver County represents almost 4,000 homeless people, comprising over 40% of the state's overall. The city's central area has experienced a spike in noticeable camps, especially near Civic Center Park and 5 Points. At the same time, Colorado Springs, the state's second biggest metropolis, has seen a 33% increase in unsheltered homelessness in the last 3 years, driven by shortages in interim lodging and overburdened refuges. Aurora, frequently sidelined in statewide talks, is subtly emerging as a center for makeshift settlements along streams, by commuter train stops, and on the fringes of communal parks. Although some might think this issue is restricted to major urban centers, homelessness in Colorado is progressively extending to suburban and rural areas. In locales such as Boulder and Fort Collins, housing affordability shortages and rising evictions are generating fresh surges of relocation. Even quaint highland communities like Durango aren't spared, with officials noting upticks in car campers and families depending on brief hotel accommodations. What precisely is propelling this statewide escalation? It's more than housing scarcity. It's a convergence of elevated rents, unchanging salaries, mental health deficiencies, and a setup that responds rather than anticipates. Even more concerning is how these figures stay persistently elevated despite substantial funding poured into aid initiatives. How many individuals must reside in camps and beneath roadways before a locale acknowledges the issue is foundational? How long can we depend on temporary remedies as the enduring problem intensifies? Colorado's homeless group isn't an isolated oddity. It mirrors a wider, countrywide pattern one that increasingly shapes the panorama of homelessness in America. And if the counts keep climbing, the concern won't merely be aiding those outdoors, but if we're ready for how swiftly someone might become one of them. Over the past few years, Colorado has become a focal point for two intertwined public health issues: a sharp rise in fentanyl overdoses and the unexpected drawbacks of marijuana legalization. Although the state was initially celebrated for its forward-thinking approach to cannabis policy, the current situation is much more intricate and hazardous, particularly for those experiencing homelessness. Fentanyl, a man-made opioid, about 50 times more potent than heroin, has emerged as the primary driver of overdose fatalities throughout Colorado. Data from the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment shows that the state saw more than 1,200 deaths related to opioids in 2023, with fentanyl responsible for over 70% of them. These figures are even more devastating among the homeless community. In Denver, emergency responders indicate they use naloxone, an antidote, for overdoses multiple times each week, frequently in makeshift camps or deserted structures. But how does marijuana factor into this scenario? Legalization in 2012 brought optimism, oversight, tax income, and employment opportunity. Indeed, Colorado has generated billions from cannabis revenue. Yet, for certain at-risk people, legal weed has turned into an entry point not directly to stronger substances in the classic way, but to a pattern of ongoing desensitization, disconnection, and aimless wandering. In unstable circumstances, the ready availability of inexpensive, potent THC items can obscure the boundary between managing stress and descending into chaos. The sidewalks of central Denver now paint a contrasting picture. Aid providers describe individuals mixing fentanyl with cannabis to alleviate bodily discomfort and psychological wound. Some use it to rest on concrete, while others seek to erase the reasons for their predicament. Is this the outcome we envisioned in talks about innovative drug laws? Or have we swapped one type of criminal penalty for a subtler form of decline? Though reforming drug policies has benefits, the fentanyl surge underscores that public health should drive discussions, not financial gain or political agendas. In the larger story of homelessness across America, Colorado's avenues offer a stark warning. Availability without oversight can turn into a lethal combination. Four, housing shortage, the underlying cause of homelessness in Colorado. Although substance abuse, joblessness, and psychological disorders all play roles in escalating homelessness, one element supports them all: the absence of affordable homes. In Colorado, the housing shortage isn't merely a side matter. It's the core reason why thousands find themselves without shelter. Unlike abrupt financial disruptions, this problem has developed gradually over time. From 2020 to 2024, average rental costs in Colorado rose by over 32%, as reported by the Colorado Housing and Finance Authority. In Denver specifically, the median rent per month in 2025 surpasses $2,250, positioning it among the priciest inland cities in the U.S. This expense is unattainable for those on minimum wage or disability benefits. At the same time, the supply of low-cost housing has plummeted. Per the National Low-Income Housing Coalition's 2024 findings, for every 100 renters with extremely low incomes in Colorado, just 29 affordable and accessible units are available. The deficit is particularly acute in city areas, but is now extending to outlying neighborhoods and rural communities, exerting strain across the state. Consequently, emergency shelters and interim housing initiatives are swamped. Waiting periods have extended from weeks to months. Households, even those with employed adults and kids, are resorting to vehicles, budget hotels, or outdoor areas for living. What occurs when someone employed full-time can't afford residence in their work city? And how can an individual reconstruct their existence without a reliable place to stay? Colorado's lack of housing isn't solely an inventory issue, it's a systemic breakdown. Within the wider framework of homelessness in the U.S., it highlights a difficult reality. Even rule followers can end up excluded and overlooked. Five, COVID-19, the crisis that permanently upended countless lives. For numerous residents of Colorado, the COVID-19 outbreak went beyond a mere medical crisis. It delivered a catastrophic financial and societal impact that forever changed their trajectories. What started as a short-term shutdown soon evolved into an enduring hardship for people barely scraping by from one salary to the next. For countless others, it served as the decisive factor that stripped them of their residences. At the height of the outbreak, Colorado shed more than 375,000 positions in just weeks, based on figures from the Colorado Department of Labor and Employment. Sectors such as hospitality, dining, and travel, which relied heavily on low-income employees, suffered the most severe setbacks. As companies closed their doors, work hours dwindled, and schedules vanished, the security that had sustained housing for many evaporated as well. Measures halting evictions offered brief respite, yet they failed to deliver lasting fixes. Once safeguards lapsed in the latter part of 2021 and early 2022, property owners started seeking overdue payments through legal channels. A large number of renters, unable to make up the arrears, were simply unable to endure. Consequently, eviction cases skyrocketed, especially in Denver County, where submissions exceeded twice the amounts seen before the pandemic. At the same time, facilities for the homeless had to limit their occupancy to adhere to distancing protocols. Support outreach groups reduced their operations, traveling health services downsized, and programs for interim housing halted accepting new participants. For those already contending with psychological disorders, substance dependency, or joblessness, the disconnection from aid networks drove them deeper into solitude. How can one rebound when the mechanisms intended to assist are shuttered, diminished, or swamped? For a multitude in Colorado, the response is, you can't. You just adjust to surviving in the open air. This represents one of the underreported chapters in the larger tale of homelessness across America. COVID-19 did more than reveal pre-existing vulnerabilities. It shattered existences that were barely holding together, thereby generating a fresh group of the unhoused individuals who never envisioned ending up in such circumstances. 6. What steps is the government taking to tackle this emergency? Amid the escalating homelessness throughout Colorado, authorities at state and municipal levels have introduced a broad range of measures focused on mitigation, assistance, and avoidance. However, despite the abundance of initiatives and the resources allocated, outcomes have been uneven, leaving many profoundly dissatisfied. In Denver, municipal leaders have allocated over $250 million from 2020 to 2024 for services tied to housing and homelessness. A significant portion has supported efforts like safe outdoor spaces, which are supervised encampment areas equipped with hygiene facilities and protection, alongside supportive residences providing in-house guidance. The city has additionally repurposed old hotels as interim accommodations, a tactic that grew swiftly during the pandemic with federal relief funds. On the state level, Colorado established the Office of Homeless Initiatives in 2022 to enhance coordination among various cities and counties. Yet detractors contend that administrative divisions continue to obstruct advancements. Initiatives frequently operate in isolation, with housing managed by one agency, mental health by another, and addiction recovery by yet others. Such divisions produce obstacles that those without homes must overcome independently. Arguably, the greatest hurdle is the speed of execution. Constructing additional housing involves dealing with intricate zoning regulations, neighborhood opposition, and protracted approval timelines. Even after gaining clearance, projects might require 2 to 5 years before construction begins. During that period, many more individuals could become displaced. Thus, the inquiry persists. Is the governmental reaction progressing swiftly enough to align with the desperation on the ground? And are the appropriate voices influencing the decisions? There are undoubtedly indicators of sincere efforts, trial programs, boosted budgets, and collaborations between public and private sectors. But in the everyday experiences of people resting on pavements or in crammed refuges, these actions frequently appear overly delayed and insufficient. In the nationwide account of homelessness in America, Colorado stands as an instructive example, generously resourced, genuinely motivated, yet still not measuring up. Unless structural impediments are dismantled and successes are gauged, not by documentation, but by transformed existences, the divide between strategy and actuality will only grow larger. I have come to realize that this isn't merely a housing shortage or a financial shortfall, it's a profound ethical lapse. As you stroll through Denver's city center and spot a person huddled on a scrap of cardboard next to a sleek Tesla, it reveals a deep systemic flaw. When families are forced to rear their children in makeshift camps as high-end apartments tower nearby, that's not simply disparity, it's apathy embedded in our structures. We forfeit the right to claim civilized status if we allow individuals to shiver in the shadows while we quibble over building regulations. It's indefensible to pour fortunes into athletic arenas when crisis centers reject the needy every evening. The machinery of change isn't sluggish, it's resistant. Remedies aren't absent, they're just troublesome for those in authority. From my observations, I've concluded this outright. Homelessness across Colorado has evolved beyond a mere indicator. It's a direct result. And should we, as citizens, continue tolerating the intolerable, we become complicit in its persistence. In the wider context of homelessness nationwide, this transcends Colorado. It's a reflection of our society. It's high time we face it head on. Conclusion. Colorado, with its majestic mountains and thriving urban hubs, was never meant to harbor such scene. But now we're confronted with a predicament that can't be shrugged off as another's responsibility. The surge in homelessness isn't an unavoidable calamity. It's the product of deliberate policies, faulty frameworks, and prolonged indifference. Homelessness in America has grown beyond a label. It's an alarm bell, signaling that vulnerability spares no one. A single overlooked salary, a health crisis, or an unaffordable rent increase is all it takes. In that instant, the divide between us and them evaporates. This presentation wasn't solely about numbers or municipal funds, it centered on human worth. It hinged on the fundamental idea that every person merits a secure, comforting space to exist as a human being. If demanding that in a nation of such abundance seems excessive, perhaps we forfeited not only shelter but our communal bond. The next occasion you encounter someone enduring life on the pavement, skip questioning their path there. Instead, ponder what we failed to do to avert their descent until our next discussion.